everybody, this is Palace of Forest. I'm Old June. Today we are talking about Reagan era. Recently, a documentary movie about President Reagan was released, and I realized that U.S.-Soviet relation resemble my analogy about the U.S.-China relationship even more. Gorbachev really admired the U.S., whether it was during the Soviet era or later in Russia. The admiration for America and Europe far exceeds that of China. It's like a romantic relationship. The woman is deeply devoted, one-sidedly affectionate, with unwavering admiration, following the man wholeheartedly. But the man ignores her, hangs out with his friends, and suppresses her. However, if the man shows even a slight interest, the woman will immediately embrace him, forgetting the past. It's sad, but this is the sentiment between Russia and the US after the Cold War. The entire world developed a deep admiration for America. However, after the Russian-Ukraine war, US-Russian relations is on the road without return. In any case, Reagan was the final straw that broke the Soviet Union. How amazing, how amazing, how amazing. Reagan's first wife, the famous Jane Whitman, I watched many of her films when I was young. She wasn't particularly beautiful, but she was a great actress and even won an Oscar in 1948. Reagan, on the other hand, was stuck in B movies. Eventually, they divorced and later married Nancy. By 1967, Reagan had become the governor of California. At that time, I thought it was so strange that Americans would elect a movie star as governor. Later, I was even more surprised when in 1980s, Reagan became president. Unbelievable. Let's talk about some interesting facts about Reagan. 1. The assassination attempt. The movie starts with Reagan being shot by an assassin. A truly shocking scene. I don't understand why Americans always seem to want to assassinate the presidents. Reagan was incredibly lucky. The bullet pierced his lung and barely missed his heart. Or he might have died. Actually, stricter gun control might not prevent such shootings. It's part of American national character. The country was founded by a group of Puritans seeking religious freedom, escaping authoritarian monarchs in Europe. That's why the U.S. Constitution gives people the right to bear arms, which means they have the right to resist tyranny. Later, the violent expansion into the West driving out the nearly exterminated Native Americans. Naturally, guns were heavily involved. The so-called Wild West and its gunfights and violence are exactly what Western cowboys movies portray. Number 2, air traffic controllers strike. In August 1981, more than 11,000 air traffic controllers went on strike. Their contracts actually prohibit strikes, but the union ignored this and pressed ahead. Some workers eventually returned, but some hardliners refused. Reagan arrested hardliners, fired them, and banned them from ever being rehired again. After this, there were no similar strikes for the rest of Reagan's term. I admire Reagan's decisiveness. He doesn't thinking about the re-election, but act resolutely without hesitation. Number 3, INF Treaty with Gorbachev. In 1986, Reagan met with Gorbachev in Iceland, and by December 1987, they signed the INF Treaty, Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. However, the US withdrew from the treaty in August 2019, and now mid-range nuclear missiles can fly freely again. The film shows how the Soviet Union tough stance was only a facade. By that time, it couldn't hold on any longer. The treaty limits intermediate-range nuclear missiles, which was a reasonable move for both sides. The Soviets thought they could cozy with the US, so they agreed. Later, Russia even wanted to join NATO, but the US and the West never accepted Russia as part of Europe. This estrangement stemmed from Russians being ruled by the Mongols for 240 years, and its long history of communism, serfdom, dictatorships, and autocracy, which the US and Western Europe had embraced the freedom, human rights, and elections by the 19th centuries. Russia was left outside like an orphan. Number 4, Iran-Contra affair. Between 1981 and 1986, the US sold weapons to Iran, using the profit to fund the Nicaraguan rebels. But selling weapons to Iran was prohibited by Congress. This was a major scandal. In 1986, Lawrence Welch began investigating the affair, and by March 1987, Reagan publicly took responsibility for the whole incident on TV. Some people were convicted, but under President Bush, later, they were all pardoned. This can be attributed to Reagan's doctrine, which supported anti-communist guerrillas and anti-Soviet groups in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. 5. Berlin Wall. On June 12, 1987, Reagan went to Berlin and gave a speech near Berlin Wall, calling on Gorbachev to tear down the wall if the Soviet Union wanted freedom, peace, and prosperity. It was a deeply moving speech. Gorbachev did tear down the Berlin Wall, but Russia did not achieve freedom, peace, or prosperity. The reasons are complex, but one thing is clear. The US and Europe never accepted Gorbachev as one of their own. Russia was always seen as an outsider, so Russia was deceived. Reagan Doctrine were a great success. Today we ended here. I hope you like it. Thank you. See you next time.